Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Korda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. During this series, we're going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Youngstown. And joining me in today's show is Wally Dunne. Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you, Father.
You know, you've been with the Diocese of Youngstown for a long time. I think it would be good for the folks that are with us to kind of give us a little background as to the beginnings of how you started with the diocese and what was your position and what that was all about.
Well, my first assignment was at St. Paul's, Salem. I taught 7th and 8th grade. I was there from 65 to 67. I went from there to St. Mary Warren, Ohio, and I was there as a teacher from 67 until I think it was 69, I think it was. And I was assigned as assistant principal, the first lay administrator in a Catholic elementary school in our diocese. And stayed there until the middle school was completed, and I was assistant principal in middle school as well. And then in 71, I moved to St. Edward as principal, and I was there until 1989. And in 89, I had the opportunity to go to St. John in Ashtabula as principal, and I was there for 3 years, and then the diocese, of course, decided to close it. And I formed a couple of corporations, and we reopened it as an independent Catholic high school, and I appointed myself as president, and we hired a principal. And then I was there. I needed a paid job, too, so I went to St. Patrick as principal, and I was doing both jobs for quite a while, and then I dropped out of the St. John job and stayed at St. Patrick Hubbard as principal until the diocese asked me to come down and be Director of Government Programs Resource Development at the central office. And I was there from 93 or 95, I think it was. And then after Nick Walsinovich left, Bishop Tobin appointed me as interim superintendent. And then when Dr. Scooby came in as superintendent, I went back to my government programs job and later ended up as assistant superintendent, and that's when I retired out in 2011. So officially retired.
Officially. Now, we know that with the church, you really never retire. You still work or volunteer, give your time. Let's talk about Catholic education, because that's really one of the mainstays in the Catholic institution. Why are Catholic schools so vital to who we are as Catholics and to our mission?
I'd like to look at some hard data on that. And I saw your question on the slip that you sent me, and I'm reflecting back on the time of Vatican II, and I happened to be in the schools when Vatican II was just starting to gain traction, and the schools played a very important role in that, in helping our students and eventually their parents and the community through the change to the vernacular and the change in the order of the Mass and all those kinds of things. It was critical that kids learned that, and I think we formed kids who became a bridge from Vatican II into what our traditions have become now. I think too, I see the schools as a critical element in the whole tradition of our Catholic faith. The formative years that we have and what we're able to do with kids, say to kids, and have kids say back to us as students is a critical element in forming those kids into being good, active Catholic citizens. I like to, some years ago, you're too young to remember this, I'm sure, but many years ago there was a real brouhaha across the nation because they found out that entertainment companies were introducing into their films every 10th frame a frame that said "eat popcorn." So it was subliminal.
Yes.
And people were outraged at that, but it worked, okay? And they were outraged at it, but sometimes we forget those lessons. So I think some of the subliminal things we do with kids in school too help them respond to in ways in which the church would ask them to respond to their life and their society and their culture and their country and their state. And I think we're happy with that.
Now, in the last few minutes of our first segment together, let's talk about the Catholic schools, because many of the institutions, many of the parishes in our diocese and dioceses across the country really had a parish school.
Yeah.
What about those parishes that never had a parish school and don't have schools now? Are there any difference with that?
What I see happening there is, in 1965 when I started at St. Paul, there were, I believe, 70,000 kids in our Catholic schools in the Diocese of Youngstown. We now have a kiss over 6,000. In 65, that was K through 12. Now, or I'm sorry, 1 through 12. Now it's K through 12. The parishes that did not have a school in those days gone by cooperated with those parishes that did. And as principal of St. Edward's School, I know, we had students there from Cyril Methodius and Peter and Paul, and parishes where they're St. Columba, where they're St. Cyril Methodius, where their parishes had closed the school, but they cooperated with St. Edward, and we received those kids into our enrollments. So even those parishes recognized the importance of Catholic education. Their parents recognized it and went to the most available Catholic school. You'll remember the bishop's document some years ago where they said that Catholic education had to be both available, accessible, and affordable. And I believe parents take that to heart.
I think they do. Let's talk also about the sense that there are some Catholic schools that have an overabundance of non-Catholic kids present. Why is that okay, or why is that part of our mission?
Well, I think we are no less a Catholic school when we have a population that might be 90 or 95% non-Catholic. When those parents come in and bring their children into school, they well know that those kids are going to be going to a religion class. Right. They have to attend respectfully. They are going to be attending the religious services that the rest of the school normally would be going to as well. They're not exempt from that. And often, some of our parishes and administrators will invite in some pastors from other denominations to meet with their kids and to share their life experiences and their faith experiences. They're very ecumenical in that way. I think it's been very good for us. We find a larger number of the non-Catholic kids coming in through the Ed Choice program, the state-supported program, and it has had a tremendous impact on our schools, especially the center city schools. We're
going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but I think we're going to take a quick break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back. The Catholic Diocese of Youngstown was established on May 15, 1943. 2018 marks the 75th anniversary of the diocese. There are 6 counties which make up the Diocese of Youngstown: Ashtabula, Columbiana, Mahoning, Portage, Stark, and Trumbull. There are 5 other dioceses in the state of Ohio, Cincinnati being the oldest, Cleveland, Youngstown's mother diocese, Columbus, Steubenville, and Toledo. Youngstown is the smallest in terms of area, and the second smallest in terms of population, yet it has the 3rd highest percentage of people identifying themselves as Catholics. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. It was in Dungannon, Ohio, in Columbiana County, that the first group of Catholics settled. St. Philip Neri, the first parish in all northern Ohio, was founded in 1817 under the title of St. Paul's Settlement. It was to visit this settlement that Father Edward Fenwick, the Apostle of Ohio, made his first trip to northern Ohio. 4 years later, Cincinnati was chosen as the see city in the state of Ohio, and Fenwick was selected as the first bishop. Today, St. Philip Neri remains the oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown, but it is also one of the smallest. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Wally Dunne, and before the break, we were talking about that whole idea of the importance of Catholic education and Catholic schools as missions. Let's take a little different aspect. Looking at the schools as an administrator, how important is it for administrators in our Catholic institutions, especially our Catholic high school and grade school institutions, to be people grounded in the faith? And how important is that also to have that ability to be able to communicate the faith to others?
Well, I think we've always expected the teachers and administrators in our school to be people of faith. And it's very important, I think, that they are people of our faith. We imbue all of our teachings with Catholic philosophy, Catholic principles, Catholic ethic, and whether it's math class and how honest you are with that, or whether it's a social studies class and the civics classes and English classes, and we try to imbue all of those subjects, all of those areas with our philosophy, our Catholic point of view. It's made easier when the Catholic teacher, the teacher is Catholic, Roman Catholic, and they are grounded in that faith. However, I can tell you that I have seen and had teachers who were not Catholic, who were people of deep faith, and shared that with students, and the kids were enriched by it.
Let's talk about some of those early administrators in the Catholic school system that you would have experienced and worked with, like Bishop Malone. Tell me of some of your experience of Bishop Malone and how he was as an administrator, and also someone who was very committed to Catholic education.
Well, he is really one of the reasons I ended up in Catholic education. Bishop Malone and my mother were classmates at Ursuline High School.
Okay.
And in 1952, I believe it was, he called my mother and he wanted her to consider going into the cadet teacher program. My mother couldn't do it. For whatever reasons, she couldn't do it.
Okay.
She felt very bad that she had to tell her friend, Father Malone, that she couldn't do it. And so she got me and my sisters, my sister at that point, and she said, I can't do that, but you're going to. In 1952, my mother told me that is after I finished St. Patrick's School in Youngstown, that I was going to go to Ursuline. Well, that got changed when they put the boundary in and built a new high school.
Sure.
Went to Cardinal Mooney. And you're going to go to John Carroll University, and you're going to live with your aunt. Well, now when you get out of John Carroll, you're going to teach in the Catholic schools.
Right.
I can tell you that there were a number of times when I tried to move away from that promise I had to make, and I never did. I always pulled back into it, but it's because Malone asked my mother that it brought me into it, and my family, and my kids, and my grandkids, and it's something that I cherish.
Isn't that how it always works, though? You know, it's almost like generational, whether it's in Catholic education or ministry or volunteering in the church. You know, what we do, we hand on to those who come after us. And so that's a wonderful celebration of your family, but also lifting up that whole importance of Catholic education.
I have grandkids in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, Cleveland Diocese, and the Diocese of Monterey, who attend their Catholic schools. And my daughters, my son, have always been very active in their parish schools. And I'm amazed at how the conversation is the same in Cleveland, in Pebble Beach, in Philadelphia, about Catholic education, the challenges of supporting it and making it grow and sustaining it, and the benefits that people see in having Catholic education available to them. There's a study that came out. I heard about it on public radio in Detroit just last week, and it's being published by USC, the University of Southern California, and they did a study of education across the board in the United States, looking for differences. And these are not people who are necessarily Catholic school based, but all of a sudden they recognized that Catholic schools, there was something really different. And they kind of post-holed into it to see what that was. And they came up with self-control. And I thought, that's a strange thing to be reported, you know. But when you think back about our experiences in Catholic education, it is. But it's faith-based, it's ethics-based, and they're touting that as one of the great successes of Catholic education. I can't wait to get a copy of the whole document.
That's interesting. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about religious women who were so much a part of the institution of our Catholic schools. Do you think that was probably one of the mainstays for the beginning of our Catholic education?
Absolutely. And if you look at Sister Jerome Corcoran, who was really the one who pasted together the whole structure of our diocesan schools, we were actually a part of the Cleveland Diocese, as you know, and even up when I started school in 1948 at St. Patrick, we were part of the the Cleveland Diocese. Cleveland Diocese supervised our schools, and there was always this big photo around when they were coming to visit. But Sister Jerome Corcoran, and I can recall Sister Bernadine Jancy, Sister Lucille Conley, just women of faith of tremendous energy who formed our schools into what they became as Youngstown diocesan schools. Many of those sisters actually came from the Cleveland Diocese too. True. Then we had our own Ursulines who were more local. Sister Miriam Mengels, who was principal of St. Patrick for many years and later Mother Superior. Sister Mary Edith, my first grade teacher, who loved me so much she kept me for 2 years. And Sister Cecilia Moran, who directed the St. Patrick's Boys Choir, which was just, I mean, that was a formative thing in my life and many other guys too, I know, in St. Patrick's Parish. Yeah, I look at the Ursuline sisters, the HM sisters, and the Oblates and the others who served in our diocese, and you really have to credit them. You really do, because lay teachers didn't really start coming in until the 1960s, and these women held it on the rail. Yeah, they really did.
They did, and you know, it's kind of unfortunate and sad that we don't have that presence, not only of the religious women, but also diocesan priests within those institutions. And so why does it make it more crucial for the laity to kind of take on those roles, to be those leaders within those institutions?
I think some of that was laid out by Vatican II also. It may not have come to fruition in the first few years, but I think the direction was certainly there, that the laity had to take a stronger role in education and in their parishes, take over some of the ministries. I don't know that they actually anticipated the shortages that later came about, but I think it was certainly a good idea to begin it back in the 60s, because now it has given the church, you know, a good picking ground for people to fill in on those ministries. And I think in some of the ministries, sometimes they may be very well served by lay people, some of the family ministries, etc. So,
we're going to take another quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Miles from the first Catholic parish in all of Ohio, in a place called Canton, Catholics gathered in 1817 to celebrate Mass with Father Fenwick. Because of limited building space, the Mass was held outdoors under a huge oak tree. The spot near the present Church of St. John the Baptist, which was established in 1823 as the second oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown. The oak tree grew there until 1906, when it was struck by lightning. To preserve it, the parishioners took the wood and carved a chair out of it, which remains in the church today. In 2012, St. John the Baptist was elevated to a basilica. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future.
$33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
The first Catholic parish, established in Portage County in 1831 near Randolph-Suffield, was St. Joseph Church. Years later, John Newman, who would become the first American male to be canonized, was sent there to give a mission to help heal the divisions that occurred between the German Catholics who had settled there. Perhaps that is what made him a saint. The parish is also noted for its school, which dates back to 1832, being the oldest English-speaking school west of the Alleghenies. The church is also famous for its Lourdes Shrine, which has welcomed pilgrims since 1927 and is the only exact replica of the world-famous grotto at Lourdes in France. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Wally Dunne. You know, some of the facts and the figures that we were talking about, Wally, are really astounding when you look at the beginnings of Catholic education here in the Diocese of Youngstown. And we've seen over the years, unfortunately, an attrition and some diminishing of those who are opting into Catholic education, but also there's a decrease in the numbers of children that families are having. Right. So what are some of the things that you have seen change over these many years as part of your experience?
Well, one of the things, I think I mentioned the fact that back in 68, 69, there was, I think I said 70,000, it's like 40,000 students in our schools. It's still a large number, and we are around just a kiss over 6,000 right now. And one of the things I do with, or still do with the diocese, to look at some of the demographics and some of the issues that come up. If you look at the drop in the populations in our schools, and you go back and look at percentage-wise from census, the number of school-age kids that are out there, and you look at that across northeastern Ohio, the census has dropped, regular census has dropped in northeastern Ohio. And our portion of that available group of kids hasn't changed that much percentage-wise. What has really changed is the population in northeastern Ohio. After World War II, I know there was a movement to the suburbs, and our Catholic communities had kind of clustered around either regional or territorial or ethnic parishes. And as they moved to the suburbs, that all changed, and the affiliations and the where they go to Mass every Sunday changed. And that, I don't think we were ready for that fluidity as a church. And all of a sudden, there it was. I see that continuing now, but I'm sorry to say, what my data tells me is that people aren't just moving to the suburbs, they're moving out of Ohio. Sure. And it's because of job markets, et cetera. We always prided ourselves in producing kids who are ready for the job market, who are going to be good, productive citizens. Well, they are. But all of a sudden, if there's no place for them to produce, they move on. And we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot in that sense, that we've created some people who are very, very, very ready to move into the job market. I think right now, though, if we look at the way things are settling down, I don't believe our schools are going to be suffering any huge losses, personnel-wise or staffing-wise, enrollment-wise. I really believe, I see a stability coming back, but it's a stability that isn't the same as it was right after World War II. Sure. You know, we know our parishes in the suburbs have had to grow. The ministries have changed. Basically, some parishes used to be a school parish or a parish school. It was one way or the other. Right. And now, you know, there are so many other needs that a parish has that they have to meet with divorced and remarried, with senior citizens, with all of the other needs that come up that the church tells us we really need to be prepared to handle. That means that the school has a different role. I gave a little workshop up in Cleveland here 2 years ago. We were talking about some visions that had come out for the Youngstown Diocese and some things that were happening in Cleveland Diocese. And it's good. Our schools have to be relevant to what is happening in the church. And I think they also have to be very obvious in how they respond to it. Their value is going to be seen in that relevance and how they respond to it. And our schools are well prepared to do that.
You know, it's interesting, as you were talking, one thing that came to mind is that Catholic schools may not be as numerous in our area and surrounding state, but Catholic education and Catholic schools and those institutions are still flourishing around the country. And they're important for us as a diocese to maintain and to uphold. As you go back to when you first started in Catholic education, and then obviously on the forefront of Vatican II, how did you see that change in from a pre-Vatican II to a Vatican II then post-Vatican II church?
Well, I can tell you that I remember I was at a parish where some of the congregation was very opposed to having the priest face the congregation, and they always wanted to see his back. Okay, little things like that became big issues with some people. There was a time when we went through a real turmoil over family studies in the school and whether our schools should actually be involved with family studies. And that was out post-Vatican II. And again, you saw that edge there. You know, there was some people who were considered conservative because they were pre-Vatican II of mind, and others who were considered liberal because they were avant-garde Vatican II. And I think it's wonderful the way we steered the ship through all of that. And I think our schools help navigate that.
You know, and I think our leadership helped that too. Certainly Bishop Malone, who was instrumental at the Vatican II Council meetings and conferences, certainly brought that wealth of information and that experience back to us.
He did.
And we are fortunate people to have taken that and carried that on for future generations. What about, in the last few minutes of our time together, are some of the hopes that you have for Catholic education, not only here in our diocese, but beyond, and also as we look towards 100 years, for example, here in Youngstown?
Well, having grown up in the Diocese of Youngstown, I can't separate myself from my feelings about the diocese and our schools and our kids and our families. And all of a sudden, I'm finding myself being interested in schools that my kids are attending. St. Ignatius High School in Cleveland, my grandkids, St. Christopher's in Cleveland, St. Elizabeth's in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, and Bishop Shanahan near there, and Notre Dame and Palma out in California, and Junipero Serra out in Pebble Beach. And I look at that, and I try to focus on it from our diocesan point of view, and where we are, and the fact that we are downsizing in the sense of the number of available schools, but I don't think in any way whatsoever the fervor that parents have for sending their kids to our Catholic schools has been diminished at all. And I really look forward to that being maintained and perhaps even increasing in the coming decades. The study out of California with the one little focus on self-control. I mean, those kinds of things that come up nationally and start to focus on the qualities of Catholic education, I think are going to help us move forward.
Sure. Well, Wally Dunne, we're unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you for your presence on the show today, but also for all that you've done in Catholic education, for Catholic schools, and also for that administration portion that is so crucial to the mechanics of keeping our schools well-oiled and entrenched in the faith of the Catholic Church. So thank you very much for doing that.
It's an honor to be here.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Korda.